In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to read a weather map station model and give you instructions on how to complete the station model lab activity. So the first thing I'm going to do is just give you an overview of how to read a weather map station model. You always start at the center of the weather map station model when you look at the circle. The circle is always going to show you the amount of cloud cover. So you will look at the shaded part on the inside of the circle and use the key to tell you what percentage of the sky is covered in clouds. In this particular weather station model, about 3/4 is covered in clouds, so 75%. The wind direction is always indicated by a bar that comes off of the circle that shows cloud cover. You read this like you would a compass rose. This bar is pointing in what would be a southern and western direction, so this is southwest. The wind speed is represented by feathers that are attached to the bar that represents wind direction. One full feather is equal to 10 knots. In some station models, it will represent 10 miles per hour. One half of a feather is representative of 5 knots or 5 miles per hour. So if you put the two together, you have 10 plus 5, which equals 15 knots or 15 miles per hour. The air temperature in degrees Fahrenheit is always shown in the top left-hand corner uh, of the circle for the cloud cover. The dew point in degrees Fahrenheit is always shown in the bottom left-hand corner. Between those two temperatures is where you will find the symbols that represent the type of precipitation that is taking place. Here you see the symbol that is represented for snow. If there are no symbols there, if the space is blank, that means there is no precipitation type. This shows visibility, which we're not going to be concerned about. Barometric pressure is always shown in the top right hand. If this number is less than 500, you put a 10 in front of the number and move the decimal one space to the left. If this number is 500 or greater, you put a 9 in front of the number and move the decimal one space to the left. And those instructions are located right here on your procedures. So if you have trouble with that, you can refer back to this. And I'm also going to look at this with you once again when I'm showing you how to fill out part 1 of your station model lab. Also, if we look at the bottom right-hand corner of the weather map station model, this will show you the amount of precipitation that has accumulated in the past 6 hours. In between the barometric pressure and the amount of precipitation will show you the barometric trend. This would be increasing. Put a decimal between the two numbers, that would be 1.2 millibars rise in pressure in the last 3 hours. It's a rise because we see the plus sign. What I really want you to focus on more than anything is that the air pressure is rising because you see the plus sign. If you see the minus sign, you know that the air pressure is dropping. Now, for part 1 of your weather station model, you are given 5 weather station models that have been drawn for you, and you have to be able to take the information from those station models and use that information to fill out a chart in locating the temperature, barometric pressure, precipitation type, percent of the sky covered in clouds, wind direction, wind speed, in knots, and air pressure rising or falling. So I'm going to go through station model 1 with you first. So if we look for air pressure, if we look for temperature and dew point, the air temperature is always in the top left-hand corner, and the dew point is always in the bottom left-hand corner. So the air temperature is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and the dew point is 64 degrees. So if we go over to the chart and we find temperature, the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit would be 65 And the dew point, it doesn't ask for here, so we don't have to fill that out. Then if we look at our precipitation type, which is located between those two numbers, we see two parallel lines. If you look at your symbols for precipitation, you see that that represents fog. So on our chart for precipitation type, we're going to type in fog. If we look at the circle that represents sky condition, we see that it is completely colored in. It's black, which would represent completely overcast, which would be 100% coverage. So here in percent of sky covered by clouds, we would put 100%. If we look for the wind direction, we can see that the bar is pointing due south. And if we look at the wind speed, we see there's 2 full feathers and 1/2 of a feather. So if 1 full feather is 10 and there are 2 full feathers, 10 plus 10 is 20, and there's 1/2 of a feather, which is 5, then 20 plus 5 is 25. So we have wind that is coming from the south, and it is at 25 knots. And the last thing we have to look at is the barometric pressure. And if you remember, right over here, if the air pressure on the station model is 500 or more, place a 9 in front of the number. If it's less than 500, add a 10 in front of the number. And here it's 998, so that is 500 or greater, so we put a 9 in front of that number, so it becomes 9998. So here for barometric pressure, we're going to put 998, and then the decimal, we move 1 space to the left, so it comes between the 9 and the 8, so the barometric pressure is 999.8 millibars, and we have a negative sign, which tells us that it is not rising, it is falling. So that's how you do part 1 of your station model. Part 2, you have been given all of the data points and you have to draw your own station model from those particular cities. So starting with Rochester, we see that our air temperature is 69 degrees Fahrenheit and the dew point is 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Remembering that your air temperature always goes in the top left-hand corner, we have 69 degrees Fahrenheit was the temperature, and 58 degrees Fahrenheit is the dew point, so that goes in the bottom left hand. And then if we go back, we see that the wind direction is from the southwest at 16 knots. So we're going to draw our bar coming off of our station model, and it is going to be pointing southwest. So like a compass rose, it will be south and west. And since it is 16 knots, that would be 1 full flag, and that's close to 15, so we will do another 1/2 of a feather. So that would be about 16 knots. And then the air pressure is 1,016.9 millibars. So we work backwards here. If there is a 10 in front of the number, we take the 10 off, and we take the last 3 numbers without the decimal. So it would be 169, and that's going to go in the top right hand, 169, our air pressure. And then the sky is 50% covered in clouds, which if we go back over to our cloud cover symbols, we see 50% is half coverage. So we're going to color in half. To show that half of our sky is covered in clouds. And then the last thing we're going to look at is the present weather for precipitation, and there is none, so we don't have to draw anything for the precipitation symbols. And that is what you're going to do for part 2.